أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين اللهم صل وسلم على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم يا فتاح يا عليم افتح لنا فتحا قريبا. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. I hope everyone is doing well. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. This is session 3. So by now we should have understood why it's important to study the science. And we have looked at different proofs for that from the Quran, from the Sunnah, and from the aqwal of the Sahaba radiyallahu ta'ala anhum. And I will also remind you all that there are obviously many sayings and quotes of the scholars as well regarding the importance of the science, and those can be found in Tasheel al-Jazariya by Mufti Muhammad Umar Ismail. So that is why I did not include them in my book, because alhamdulillah, our books kind of work together, and so students would eventually study that Tasheel al-Jazariya in their coursework. Okay, so I'm putting this here. Qira'atsimplify.com is where you can, inshallah, download the Tasheel al-Jazariya. Okay. All right. So now we've come to the 4 states of waqf. The important thing to understand about this chapter is that before we can go into what kind of wuquf are good to make, like what are good places of stopping in the Quran and what are not such great places to stop in the Quran, we do have to identify what scenario or what context or what situation our stop is happening in, okay? And so, alhamdulillah, Rabbil Alameen, scholars have laid that out for us as well. So there are 4 states, meaning 4 scenarios, 4 contexts in which we could be making waqf. While reciting the Quran, the necessity to make waqf will fall into one of the 4 categories below. So the first is Idtirari, okay? Fun word to say, has a dad in it and a ta in it right afterwards. Idtirari. This is when a reciter is compelled to stop due to external factors such as losing one's breath, coughing, sneezing, or forgetting what comes next. Meaning this is not a place that you have not intended to make waqf. It's just something that happens that is not in your control. While the reciter is not capable of accounting for the meaning when making such a waqf, just to, we can't control when we sneeze or when we start coughing, right? He or she is still required to make waqf at the end of a word that is written as separated in the unique orthography of the Quran, in the rasm of the Quran. So, but we can we do understand that, okay, like I need to just kind of make it to the end of that word, okay? For example, now what does this mean? That the word is separated, that it's written as separated. Okay, what it means is that, for example, one may stop at an or lan in the following verse as they are written as 2 separate words. So you can say ayahsabu an, okay, or ayahsabu allan, okay, because they're written as 2 separate words. So if you are forced to make a stop, right, by either sneezing or coughing or forgetting, whatever, you can stop at the an or the lan because they're written separately. However, in the following verse, even a compelled stop can only be made at the end of allan as the 2 words are written as joined in the rasm of the Quran. So ayahsabu al-insanu allan, you could only stop here, okay? You could not, for example, say, oh, but actually this word is 2 words put together. It's the word an put together with the word lan. So I can stop now at, I can just kind of say an, even though the word here is written as an allan, right? So we can't do that. We have to read the word. We have to read till the end of the word as it is written in the Quran. Okay. Why? Because the rasm of the Quran is a very special matter, right? So this is not just like the writing of, normal Arabic, right? Like you would find in books or you would find in Arabic newspapers. This is a very specific way of writing. So some of the things are very similar, right? Are the same, rather, I should say, but there are certain things which are unique. And whether certain words are written as together or apart is one of the unique points of the Rasm of the Quran, and is studied. Part of it is studied in Intizari, but there are, of course, books that are dedicated to the study of the science of Rasm. In our curriculum, alhamdulillah, we have the Silu Rusum, which is available at the link that I put in the chat, qiraatsimplify.com. And we also, inshallah, Allah willing, will have another book on the topic, inshallah. In addition to the above, the reciter should make ibtida from a place that is appropriate in terms of the meaning. So what does this mean? What the scholars say is that, all right, a waqf can be compelled, right? So one can be compelled to stop. But they argue that ibtida is not compelled. However, so for example, a person is coughing, right? And so they ended up stopping at a place that is, just wherever, right? At the end of a word. They just stopped at the end of the word, right? Because they were coughing. But now when they are done coughing, or they have taken care of whatever needed to be taken care of, in terms of, like they took a cough drop, okay, let's just say that. Now they can choose where to begin from, right? So they're saying the ibtida is not compelled, right? So that's their argument, that a reciter should not resume from the word that comes after the word on which he or she stopped. Rather, he or she should resume from the word on which he stopped, or then start his or her recitation from further back, depending on what is necessary to maintain the meaning of the verse. So first, let me explain this point, which is that, okay, let's say, I started coughing at the end of al-lan, right? So I read these three words, and then I started coughing, okay? So I didn't necessarily choose my place of waqf, but after I'm done coughing, right, and I take my cough drop and everything, now I don't just start from najma'a ilama, right? Rather, I go back to أَيَحْسَبُ الْإِنسَانُ أَلَّن نَجْمَعَ عِظَامَهُ. Okay, so I go back. Why? Because that is what is best for the completion of meaning. All right. Now there is Imam Juraisi brings up a point, which is that there may be a certain scenario in which one can argue that there is such a thing as a compelled ibtida, right? That one is forced to make start from a place which may not be the best place to start from, and that is, for example, when the kuffar, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is quoting the kuffar, and what they're saying is very long, right? So if one were to stop in the middle somewhere, then to start again from like the beginning of the qawl would be difficult, right? Let's say a person doesn't have enough breath. So in that situation, he says that one is compelled to start from a place that is not necessarily the best place to start, okay? But I did not find others saying that. Rather, I found others saying that, ibtida is never, you're never compelled to start from a particular place, right? So I'm adding that point of knowledge because I think that that's important, but I did not add it in the book for that reason, okay? So that's Idtirari, where we didn't necessarily choose, we couldn't even choose where we wanted to stop. We were just compelled due to something that was out of our control. The next scenario or context in which one can make waqf is Intizari, okay? This applies when a reciter stops at a place to recite the differences in multiple qira'at, or within one qira'ah, riwayah, or tariq. The reciter is allowed to make waqf at a place where the meaning may not be complete to show the differences in the canonical readings, all right? So when we recite in something called jama', okay? So students of qira'at will be familiar with this, but we'll explain it inshallah. While the early scholars would listen to each riwayah separately, meaning that if you were reading to them for Qalun, for example, you would read to them from the beginning of the Quran to the end of the Quran in just the riwayah of Imam Qalun, right? Similarly, if you were reading to them for Imam Hafs's riwayah, you would read from the beginning to the end in Imam Hafs's riwayah, okay? Scholars began allowing students to combine readings, Jama', around the early 6th century Hijri. This is how Qari Panipati Rahmatullahi alayhi has expressed it. Even then, scholars who allowed combining the qira'at, meaning reciting them in Jama', only did so after a student had recited each individual riwayah to them. Okay, so in our times, teachers take different approaches. Some prefer students to recite each riwayah separately, while some allow students to combine similar readings only. Yet others allow combining all 10 qira'at without a student having recited each riwayah separately. All right, so alhamdulillah, I've had teachers who do all of these things. So I've had, Mufti Umar would just have us recite in Jama', right? All 10 were being recited together. And then we had, one of my teachers in Jordan, he would only allow people to recite one riwayah to him at a time, and they would actually make 20 khatams to him. And then, I've also had a teacher who, for example, and they have, courses like this, like Ahlul Tawassud or Ahlul Salah, right? But there's a certain aspect of those riwayat that is similar, and therefore they are grouped together. And then that's how they are recited, okay? However, when you are combining all of the recitations, and if you guys are wondering what this sounds like, there are lots of examples actually on YouTube where you can listen to a reciter reciting in Jama', right? Is reciting while combining all 10 readings. When reciting in Jama', 4 aspects of recitation must be maintained. Firstly, the reciter should not stop at a place that would cause an inappropriate meaning. Now, what is important to remember is this is different than the meaning not being complete. It is possible for the meaning to be incomplete without it causing an inappropriate meaning. Okay, very simple example. Maliki Yawmiddin. If you were to stop at the word Malik, that's not an inappropriate meaning. Okay, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is, Malik of Yawmiddin, right? So there's nothing wrong with that stop. It doesn't, there's nothing wrong with the meaning. Okay, however, does it express the full meaning of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying in that ayah? No. Okay, so it will be an inappropriate stop, but it's not a stop that would cause a change in meaning. So those are allowed, okay? It is okay to stop where the meaning may be incomplete, but it is not okay to stop where the meaning is the opposite of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has intended, okay? So for example, such as stopping before illa in وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً لِلْعَالَمِينَ. So you need to show the differences in the mudud here, right, while reciting in Jama'. But if you stop at وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ, and astaghfirullah, right, and you keep going back to وَمَا to show the mads, and you keep stopping at this word, you are saying, and we have not sent you, but that is wrong, right? Like that is the opposite meaning of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying. So you could stop at illa, or you could not stop, right? You could say, وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً لِلْعَالَمِينَ. You could do it that way, okay? So that would not be allowed. So you are given a lot of leeway when you're reciting in Jama', but it cannot cause a meaning that is opposite to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying. Secondly, the reciter should be careful not to begin his or her recitation from a place that would suggest an inappropriate meaning, such as Ibtida without the word qalu in the following ayah, okay? لَقَدْ كَفَرَ الَّذِينَ قَالُوا إِنَّ اللَّهَ هُوَ الْمَسِيحُ ابْنُ مَرْيَمَ. So this statement, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is clearly saying that certainly infidels are those who say, right? So the Quran is not making the statement. So if, let's say, you're stopping at in, let's say, okay, this is an incomplete meaning, but you're stopping there in order to show the difference in lengths of mad or whatever. And then after you do that, then you start from here, right? That would be incorrect, because now you are stating the statement as if that's what the Quran is saying, and it's not, okay? So although there is a lot of leeway when reciting in Jama' in terms of Waqf and Ibtida, you cannot start from a place where it states the opposite of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala intends in that verse. Thirdly, the reciter must recite with all the rules of tajweed, something that Qari Fatbani Rahmatullahi writes is severely neglected in our times. And Qari Fatbani Rahmatullahi passed away in 1986. And I'll say that 1987, I believe, 1987. And it's still the case today. Sometimes students get so caught up with making sure that they're showing all the differences, etc., that they start getting loosey-goosey with their tajweed. But I would suggest that one should, work on their tajweed and bring it to the level that regardless of what speed you are reciting in, or regardless of how focused you are on the differences in qira'at, that your tajweed is still there. It needs to be like a stone wall, right? So that you can rely on it kind of standing, even when your mental focus is on something else, okay? Fourthly, the reciter should make sure not to recite in a way that the canonical readings would be combined incorrectly. This is where you are creating awjuh, which do not exist in the qira'at, right? So for example, you are reading qasr, right? And okay, these imams read qasr, but then when you come to a particular word, you end up reading it for the way that Imam Warsh reads it, that would be incorrect because you were reading qasr for mad munfasil. Imam Warsh does not read that mad, and then you read that word the way he reads it, right? So you created this combination which doesn't necessarily fit into any one of the qira'at, okay? So one should not do that. All right, so that's Waqf Intizari, all right? It's you could say its permissions as well as its limitations, okay? And then the next is Waqf Ikhtibari. This applies when a teacher or student makes waqf on a particular word to teach or learn how waqf would be made there. This waqf can be made on any word that is not written as joined in the rasam of the Quran. The meaning does not have to be complete. However, the reciter must make ibtida from either the word on which he or she stopped, or then from one or more words before the word on which waqf was made, so that the meaning is maintained. So essentially, this is where, alhamdulillah, my teachers would do this a lot, where you're reciting and then they'll say, okay, stop on that word, stop on the word after this word, right? Because they want to see if you can stop on it correctly. Or they would say, start from the word after this word in order to see if I could start from that word correctly, right? They would do this with us a lot. Now, a lot of times, those places where they need to check if we know how to make waqf properly or not are not necessarily by a stop sign, right? So an example that is given here is a teacher may ask a student to make waqf on the word salasila, right? In the following verse, to teach them the two ways in which waqf can be made on this word, with a lam sakina or a full alif. However, ibtida will not be made from the word directly after salasila, right? So a teacher may very well, there's no stop sign there, but this is a word that we do need to teach a student because it depends on the qira'ah, it depends on the tariq, for example, in Hafs, right? How many options one has to stop there, or how does one stop there? So the teacher may say, okay, I want you to read and stop on that word, okay? So the student reads it, okay? And you can stop as both salasil or salasila, but then you don't start again from aghlalan wa sa'ira, okay? So you go back to the beginning of the ayah, or you can say salasila wa aghlalan wa sa'ira, all right? So basically, what is similar about the three, the three states that we talked about, Idtirari, Intizari, and Ikhtibari, right, is that although you are given some space in terms of like some wiggle room in terms of where you can make the waqf, when you make ibtida, you have to take the meaning into consideration. So you have to start from a place where the meaning is complete, okay? Ikhtiyari, this is when the reciter makes waqf of their own volition, without being compelled to do so due to an external factor or for learning and teaching purposes. So this is when, like, we're reciting Quran and we choose to make waqf, all right? And you know that, all right, I'm not gonna make it till the end of the ayah, so I'm gonna make waqf here. and that's a choice that you're making. All right. Or it's not because your teacher told you to, or because it's like, okay, well, I'm just going to take this waqf. I know it's not complete, but it's a good place for me to stop to show the various options in the qira'at first, and then I'll keep reading, right? So this is where you choose to make a stop. So this is the type of waqf which is intended when the word waqf is used, okay? So why was this whole discussion important about the various scenarios and contexts in which waqf is made? Is because from now on, everything else that we're going to discuss in the book is going to be about this particular scenario, right? So for example, if we are studying waqf tam or waqf kafi, or for example, waqf qabih, right? It should not come in our mind that, oh, well, what if like I just like lose my breath? Or what if like, my teacher told me to stop there, right? So that those what ifs will no longer come into our mind, because we are very clear under which context are we having this whole discussion. And that the context is those places where we choose to make waqf, okay? This is the type of waqf which is intended when the word waqf is used. So generally, when the scholars are talking about waqf and ibtida or writing books about waqf and ibtida, the assumption is that you are in a situation where you are choosing your place of waqf. This should only be made when the meaning is sufficiently complete or at the end of an ayah. It can be of 4 types. And the reason why we separated this or at the end of an ayah, because not every ayah end is that the meaning is complete. It's an ayah end is not a period, right? Like in the English language, right? It's not a full stop. There are lots of ayahs where the meaning is not complete at the end of it, okay? It can be of 4 types: complete, tam, sufficient, kafi, permissible, hasan, or inappropriate, qabih. So I want you guys to take a little moment to kind of memorize these terms for before next week, inshallah. These 4 types will be discussed in detail in the section that follows, inshallah. I also want to point out, I've written it in a footnote, that I kind of came up with these terms myself: complete, sufficient, permissible, inappropriate. You might find different English terms in other books. And if you are teaching this book and you feel like different terms are better, please feel free to swap these out, okay? All right, so inshallah, please do take some time before next week to finish or sort of go through these review questions, because it'll help you process the chapter, inshallah. And I will put the answer key in the description, okay? Please remember that the textbook is downloadable from recitewithlove.com, and you can always send me your questions by email, and I will leave that email in the comment section as well. And yes, so are there any questions now? Okay, if not, then we will stop here, okay? سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. اللهم صل وسلم على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم. ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب. يا مقلب القلوب ثبت قلوبنا على دينك. يا مقلب القلوب ثبت قلوبنا على طاعتك. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. اللهم صل وسلم على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.